Welcome to the 5th episode of our video history of Rossmoor. My name is John Nutley. This presentation will cover the period from 1975 to 1984. I call it the teenage years. Not only does it cover the 11th through the 20th year, but it also reflects the uncertainty and instability of the times. Like a teenage youngster, Rossmoor was seeking to find its way to maturity. A number of proposals were made and ideas presented, but many of these were to come to naught. If there was one theme that ran through these 10 years, it was the search for the 5th clubhouse. Part of the agreement of 1973 required that Terra, California supply the land for the clubhouse. Where that clubhouse would be had not been specified. It was suggested that the top of Sakhalin Indian Drive would be a good site, as it could serve the needs of the future residents on the east side. Immediately there was opposition. The Rossmoor Residents Association was against it. They initially favored the paying off of the debt before any new construction. However, the Golden Rain Board pointed out that current residents do not contribute to the reduction of the debt. It is the buyers of new manors or resales that have this obligation. The Rossmoor Residents Association conducted a survey and suggested several alternate sites. Discussions continued for months. In their opposition, the RRA proposed that a new construction costing more than $250,000 be put to a vote of the residents. This resulted in a series of articles in the Rossmoor News and at the community meetings. The RRA during this period had several outstanding presidents. Their forceful leadership was felt by the community. The petition for the $250,000 limitation was put on ballot by the Bylaws Committee. It stated, quote, "The Golden Rain Foundation shall not expend or obligate more than $250,000 for any single capital project without first obtaining the affirmative vote of the majority of the corporation memberships." GRF recommended a no vote on the proposal. However, the residents supported the RRA position and the bylaws amendment was passed. This was not the end. The Golden Rain Board felt that this hampered its actions regarding its obligations under the 1973 settlement agreement, particularly in regard to its obligation to borrow $1 million for the clubhouse construction. Arguments were presented to the official arbitrators. Their decision stated that the Golden Rain Foundation and Terra, California were obligated to build the 5th clubhouse regardless of the cost. It was during this period that the Community Club of Rossmoor was formed. Rudolph Kurubicchiati, a former GRF president, was its organizer. Its purpose was to serve like the Commonwealth Club by keeping its members informed on current issues of value to the community and present noteworthy speakers. It was to grow to be a counterbalance to the RRA. The study for the 5th clubhouse continued. The Rossmoor Community Planning Group, headed by Mildred Reed, was given the responsibility of examining the needs and priorities for the coming years that would maintain the Rossmoor lifestyle. It was appointed in 1975 and was to serve into the 80s. It made several reports. One supported the Sakhalin Indian site. The Rossmoor Residents Association recommended a no vote at this time. It favored a site near the tennis courts. In an opinion poll, the Golden Rain Foundation residents favored the Sakhalin site 2,099 to 2013. The Golden Rain Foundation then voted for the site on the East Ridge. Plans were drawn and presented for discussion. This issue is not dead. Other sites were suggested. The Buckeye Grove near the end of Tice Creek Drive was proposed. The tennis club wanted a regulation-sized court. The ones north of the Junior Dollar Clubhouse were in need of repair. The fifth clubhouse was not to be built in the Grove, but 4 regulation-sized tennis courts were. A parking lot and the tee house for the golfers were added. The tennis club dedicated the new courts in May of 1983. Meanwhile, rumors began circulating that the Del Valle High School might close and the 53 acres be put up for sale. This became the basis for a site shift for the proposed fifth clubhouse. As early as 1975, a Rossmoor resident suggested buying the high school. It was premature. In 1977, there was new interest in the high school property. In 1979, the Acalanes School Board had the high school appraised prior to closing it in June. The price of $10 to $15 million was too high for the purchase by Rossmoor. Acalanes was required to lease the property for educational use. Various educational laws established procedures for the disposition of school sites. JFK University rented part of the school. No public educational agency bid on the property. Meanwhile, negotiations among Terra California, JFK University, and a private capital company and the school district were underway. How to define recreational and educational use delayed progress. Finally, in March 1984, they proposed to buy the property for $9 million. Many Rossmoorians saw the possibilities. Then suddenly, Terra California announced that it had been acquired by UDC, Universal Development Corporation of Chicago. What now? Is the deal still on? How would it affect Rossmoor? Everything seemed to go on hold. Then Dave Wood, who had served the Terra California for 13 years, was replaced by Lawrence Comigi of UDC. David Wood was highly respected by Rossmoorians. They honored him by planting a golden rain tree at the corner of Golden Rain and Rossmoor Parkway. It's lighted during the holidays. At the end of 1984, no decision had been reached. What was happening to the average resident during this period? Was Rossmoor still the active adult community? There was plenty to do. Activities abounded. Parties, shows, exhibitions, trips and tours, clubs and games were available. There were new clubs formed and old ones disbanded. People joined in bridge games, dance parties, ceramic firings, art shows, and painting classes. The golf course was expanded to 27 holes, and the world of women continued to bring single ladies together. The Redwood Lounge was converted to a social center. The county library withdrew from Rossmoor because it's restricted area. We formed our own library association. This allowed us to specialize in books for senior citizen needs. The Activities Council sponsored several events during the year. There was the flea market, the Full Life Fair, and the Fall Bazaar. profits were used to purchase special gifts for the community. The various state clubs came together to form the State Clubs Federation. It coordinated club activities and sponsored the All States Day to celebrate the various sections of the country joined together in one community, Rossmoor. Of course, everyone joined in the 4th of July celebration each year. The Christmas light show was no more, but Christmas trees brightened the clubhouse, the creche continued to announce the holiday season, and the choral society sang its seasonal greetings. The service clubs actually supported their favorite causes. The Kiwanis Club held its annual Golden Wedding Party and sold fruitcakes to aid the needy. The Rotary Club raised funds for scholarships and built the pavilion in Sportsman's Park. The Lions and the High 12 held pancake breakfasts to aid the blind and the handicapped. For entertainment, the Rossmoor Follies, under the leadership of Dorothy Braun, annually presented a show with local talent, a fun-filled evening of songs, skits, and dancing. New clubs came into being to meet the special needs or to answer calls for help. In 1976, the City of Hope Auxiliary Chapter, Valley Oaks, was founded by Gidala Kimball to help with finding cures for cancer and other catastrophic diseases. The Diablo Rossmoor Foundation, now called the Diablo Foundation for the Aging, was formed to aid those with emotional, physical, and financial needs. Its conservatorship program benefited those unable to care for themselves. The Rossmoor Scholarship Foundation raised funds to offer educational help to deserving high school and junior college graduates. The fundraiser is active at holiday time. Another club formed to benefit high school students was the Del Valle High School Garden Club, sponsored by the Lions. They raised vegetables to sell to residents to benefit the students. It ended with the closing of the high school. Some clubs active during this period were gone by the year 2000. The American Legion Post was active, as was the Veterans of World War I. The Rossmoor Veterans of World War II, Medico, which raised funds for Tom Dooley's medical mission in Southeast Asia, and the Cancer Dressing Committee passed into history. The British Empire Club and the Far Eastern Club also passed from the scene. The Luther Burbank Society, founded by Alvin Langfield to beautify Rossmoor, continued for several years. Its work was taken over by the Golden Rain Maintenance Department. Another group that will be missed is the puppets of the Miniature Theater Group. It crafted the figures, built the stage, wrote the scripts, and performed stories like Alibaba and Cinderella to amuse the residents. The Recreation and Education Department, under the leadership of John Robinson of the Community Relations, presented a series of events and programs that are continued even to today. The Fun Day program of our earliest day continued to entertain residents. Recreation departments scheduled tours and trips to places like Filoli Gardens on the peninsula and the new aquarium on Monterey Bay, and up into the gold country of the Sierras. Most residents found in Rossmoor the contentment, relaxed lifestyle they desired. The opportunities for personal enrichment were varied and accessible. We were not isolated. We did have our share of notables Among those who visited Rossmoor during this period were Ronald Reagan, President Gerald Ford, and Congressman George Miller, plus assorted other political candidates for offices on the state and national level. The national economy also affected us. It went into a slump, and then in the early 80s it began to recover. Interest rates rose. Then came the fuel shortage. Terra California had built larger units to entice the newly retired, but the higher interest rates on loan blocked many of the sales. In all of 1981, only 27 units were sold. Rossmoor found it difficult to make our debt payments. The GRF and the mutual boards looked for ways to reduce the monthly coupon. By looking at the budget figures for the previous year, it was easy to see that the clinic operations were a large expense. It was suggested by the Rossmoor Residents Association and other groups that the clinic be sold, or at least to a specified medical organization. The community club opposed leasing. In response, the Golden Rain Foundation examined the possibilities. Several companies expressed an interest. Prior to making a commitment, the board asked for an opinion survey. The vote was heavily in favor of retaining the clinic under GRF control. The board dropped any major changes. To help streamline the service and to meet the state medical requirements, it hired Gary DiMercurio to supervise its operations. Another cause that affected the slowdown of building was the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency and the Walnut Creek Planning Commission. The EPA began by restricting the development of the hilltops. The Planning Commission examined the building plans of Terra California for the East Ridge. The EIR felt that there was too much reshaping of land. Restrictions and prohibitions were imposed. During this period, the number of resident units was reduced from 8,500 in 1975 to 7,500 in 1977 and to 4,500 in 1978. It also limited construction to south of the high power lines. In response, Terra California turned to other areas for construction. New buildings were initiated by extending Sanley Dollar. Then came work on Ptarmigan Drive. Terra Granada was to be extended in a sweeping curve to the south beyond the golf course and back to join Rossmoor Parkway. It was the improved economic condition near the end of the decade that brought prosperity to Terra California and income to Golden Rain Foundation. This income helped reduce our debt and pay off the obligation to the Rossmoor Corporation. The federal census count of 1980 revealed some interesting facts about Rossmoor. Women represented 65.8% of the 8,110 residents. The average age was 73.7 years. Of interest to all was the news that the average value of a manor had risen from $21,400 in 1970 to $64,200 in 1980. One unit was still less than $15,000 and one more than $200,000 in value. In 1979, Cecil Riley replaced Wayne Davis as administrator. Davis retired after 13 years of service to the community. Cecil Riley, former city manager of Oakland, immediately set about updating and streamlining business operations. Computers were installed and plans were made for a service department building on Rockview. Accounting procedures were modernized and an efficient management operation became a reality. He was to serve as general manager into the 90s. During the period of our study, we had some outstanding GRF presidents. I personally knew many of them. Rudolph Kubicki, I have already mentioned. Marguerite Weisheimer was our first woman president. Lee Mace had held several positions in Walnut Creek governance before becoming president. Dan Hutchinson was a well-educated leader with strong conviction. Lawrence Kelly was responsible for hiring Cecil Riley as general manager. Vance Austin's ideas leaned towards those of the Rossmoor Residents Association, while Gordon Bingham was more in tune with those of the community club. Lawrence Schultz arranged for the reduction of one of the loans and the refinancing of another. He encouraged Terra California to acquire the Del Valle property. The mutuals were not idle. They too were busy seeking to resolve their own problems. They had formed the Joint Mutual Board to work on common problems such as building repairs, landscaping, and painting. But all was not well. There was grumbling about how the money and the work was allotted. First Walnut Creek Mutual spoke about their concern over maintenance problem. The repair and painting authorized by the Joint Mutual Board did not satisfy the First Board. Wes Cunningham, president of First Walnut Creek Mutual, appointed a committee to determine the possibility of withdrawing from the JMB. This concern would be carried over into the next decade. Second Walnut Creek Mutual continued to have problem with earth movements, caused primarily by underground water. They had hardly finished correcting the slides on Singing Wood when new slippage appeared on entries 11 and 13 on Tice Creek Drive. Repairs were to cost over $1 million. It required the closing of the street for some time. Third Walnut Creek Mutual continued to acquire new condominium projects as they were organized and voted to merge. Reminders would be sent out to residents of their responsibilities and duties. The budgetary adjustments were frequent. I said at the beginning that these were teen years with their uncertainties and trials. Two minor items illustrate this. The GRF board purchased earthquake insurance for the community. This created an uproar. Some called it a waste of money. Some refused to pay their share. It was obvious to them that we did not need it. Then there occurred the earthquake in Coalinga, and when the residents saw the pictures of the destruction, there was silence. Similarly, the proposal to install smoke alarms in all buildings was equally ridiculed. Several grass fires near the end of summer did nothing to dissuade them. Then came a fire on Skycrest, followed by a 12-unit fire on Canyonwood. The pictures in the news of the few remaining black timbers on the ground frightened all. The cry went out for more smoke alarms, even though the cause of the fire was a defective battery charger. The mutuals planned to install detectors in all residences. So it was for the changing moods of the Rossmoorians. As early as 1983, the Rossmoor News sought to discover if any of the first-day residents were still living in Rossmoor. 4 members of the 16 families that started the community on September 30th, 1964, were still enjoying Rossmoor. Frank Papp, the first arrival, was still smiling. What had started as a few buildings at the corner of Golden Rain Road and Tice Creek Drive had now expanded to cover both sides of the valley, from Skycrest in the northwest to the far end of the golf course in the southeast. Where would the next units be built? What about the oak forest in the south? Will the city ever let us build atop the East Ridge? Will we get the 5th clubhouse from UDC Homes? These are items that will be covered in the next episode. Before we close this episode, Let us take a look at 1984. We were completing our 20th year. The Activities Council, which celebrated its 17th anniversary in March, set up a special committee. The word went out to organizations and clubs to formulate their plans for the celebration. The Rossmoor News requested pictures and stories of the early days. The residents looked forward to the celebration. On September 19th, a special edition of the news was delivered to each residence. Pictures and articles and a history written by Elsie Bloom were featured. Special programs were held in the Court of Flags and at the Gateway Clubhouse. Honored at the event were the residents who had arrived during the first year of our existence. Frank Papp was there to cut the birthday cake. GRF President Paul Warnick and business manager Cecil Riley saluted the old-timers and welcomed all those who chose Rossmoor as their new home. Here we will end our episode of Rossmoor history. The financial stability had been attained. New state law protected the 55-year-old requirement for adult communities. Plans were underway for changes in the craft and shop areas. The billiard room was moved to Hillside, and the sewing club took over their space. There was definite and upbeat feeling in the community. In our next episode, we will look at the period beginning in 1985. So until then, this is John Nutley saying thank you for watching.